Hello everyone, I'm Forrest McFreelava and this is Speedplay France number 21. We left off having taken over Africa and with all of a complete nuclear bomb ready to go and 75% of control over the air of London. So we do go ahead and just begin dropping a bomb, and apparently it takes basically all of the morning, but there we go. London has been hit by a nuclear bomb in June 5th, 1946. And we just kind of dwell on that for a moment, since that is basically the first nuclear weapon used in the war. It doesn't appear as though they're any closer to capitulating, which is a bit of a bummer. And there we go, the atomic bombing of London. Big Ben melted, Buckingham Palace completely leveled, and the royal family just missing. Now, admittedly, that doesn't really help us very much since the game continues on past the day, so do they live, do they not? I guess it's just kind of up to us to just kind of decide in our own way. We also haven't fully conquered Africa. That was a bit of a lie. Portugal still exists. We also haven't conquered all of mainland Europe, since Portugal still exists. So what we're going to do is just focus on trying to win the air wars, and that's really just a completely Air Force based thing. We are also at 8,000 manpower, so that is very, very far below ideal. We do go ahead and just mess around within our limitations for a little bit. Really, we can't realistically expect to win a war against the Portuguese if we don't have any manpower for our armies. We do go ahead and justify the war, though. We are also pressing forward against the allies in Southeast Asia, since until we win the air war, it's going to be all about land wars. And if we're going to be fighting on land, we may as well kick the Japanese out of China and then maybe eventually destroy them. It depends on whether or not we destroy the British Air Force by the time we've conquered China. If Britain's Air Force is still roving along, doing its thing, defending their home islands, then it might make more sense to just defeat the Axis once and for all, and get all those territories just fully under our control, and then maybe go for all the strategic resources and hopefully knock them out of the war in that way. At any rate, though, we're going to just continue to attack wherever we can. The air battle isn't really going too ideally or too negatively, it's just kind of going. Alright, so that all said and done, we're also going to declare war on the Portuguese in a moment. We get 5 new tanks, which is pretty nice. And we still don't really have very much in the way of manpower, but we do have enough that we can put a lot of our fighters in the field or in the skies. So we do go ahead and do that, and hopefully that will be enough to just keep the balance of power in our favor. And alright, so we can declare the war at any point. We're going to wait till more of our units get in position. We also have the final tier of rocketry, which is pretty nice. And we're going to have more and more of our forces over in China to just prepare for the inevitable defeat of the Japanese-occupied Chinese, or I guess just East Asia, we'll call it. So at any rate, we are forcing our way forward. There are still quite a bit of Allied troops just kind of chilling around in the area from when they controlled the relevant portions of the world adjacent to it. Now they're out of supply and basically just fodder, just controlling the territories, milling around until they are moved away. We also go ahead and go from total mobilization, take a look at our options and pick war economy, since it seems to be the next best one and gives us 500 additional thousand manpower. So that's pretty great. That also shows you what roughly 2.5% or 3% of our manpower pool is 200,000 or 500,000 people. So yeah, we can vaguely assume, say, 145,000 people per percent of manpower. So if we do switch to the next one up, we're at 10% of our population. We can go up to 20%, and so that'll give us maybe 1.2 some odd million, 1.45 million men. Who's really to say? At any rate, we declare war on Portugal since we now have the manpower to actually do that. And one of the main reasons to declare war on the Portuguese before moving all of our forces out of Africa and Europe is because every once in a while a country just randomly joins the Allies. And if they're going to do that, I would much rather they do that while our armies are nearby. So it's kind of one of those, well, we're worried about their neutrality, so let's just get rid of their neutrality now. Which, admittedly, if they never were going to join the Allies is kind of pointless, but we are still vaguely trying to get a world conquest if we can ever get across the English Channel. So yeah, I know it's kind of dragging on, and believe me, I feel it as well, although at this point we are making decent progress, at least against the rest of the world. We've conquered a continent, almost 2 continents, more or less, once we managed to get Portugal to capitulate. And then it's just a short ways away from being able to just defeat the Japanese, and it might be easier for us to win the naval battles and naval war in the Pacific first and then against the actual British Isles, although by that point it'll be a little bit absurd. So who's really to say? The most important thing, though, is that our forces are more or less just moving through the various Portuguese portions of the world. I'm not sure if it's just showing up slideshow-like for me recording this, or if it'll be a slideshow for everybody later on. I certainly hope that it isn't going to just be slideshow-like. However, if it is, then there are some pluses and minuses to that. The positives of it being a slideshow are you get basically the major points. We are just dominating them in Africa. We took Lisbon a moment ago. There you go, you see it again. And honestly, I kind of prefer it slideshow-like for this sort of bit because we're fighting on 3 or 4 theaters, so we jump around quite a lot. The important thing to note is that the Portuguese armies more or less got trapped on the border. We went into their interior and took over quite a bit of it. In Africa, things are slowing down simply due to the fact that it takes quite a while to get anywhere in Africa. And now there's just a few pocketed groups of Portuguese forces which we are more or less encircling and destroying. In a way, this is actually a lot nicer than actually having video for these portions. In other ways, I'm sure not so much. Like if you're seeing what I'm seeing now, we're just kind of looking at the Sahara. At any rate, though, yeah, there's also a bit of just air war not going great. Not really anything we can do much about until we get more factories. Luckily, I assume the Portuguese have a decent number of factories. We do go ahead and shift our focus over to the English Channel, so now we're winning that. We also do have some rockets we're trying to use. And yeah, we're not really winning this battle for this Portuguese victory point in Africa, which is far less than ideal. You'll notice tons of notifications for fleets getting destroyed by air forces. Not really anything we can do about that, and we're just building submarines, so it's not as though it really matters too much. We should probably build a surface fleet if we're actually going to be fighting a surface fleet sort of war later on. But it really remains to be seen. You'll notice the air war is not really going too particularly well over the British countryside itself. In Southeast Asia, we are pressing up, so we actually do border the Japanese now, which I know it had been a very important strategic interest and move on our part to avoid that for as long as we could. Now, however, since we've closed down basically every other front, though, there's no real reason to avoid it any longer. That Portuguese victory point still holding out. The rest of their army is basically down to 1 or 2, well, 3 territories, 2 pockets, and we do go ahead and just attack all of those. Portuguese Africa has declined significantly in the last few months. And yeah, the air war is more or less just a stalemate. I mean, we're losing less than they are, and I hope we're building quicker than they are, but not really anything is being achieved. So the conquest of China is probably going to be the next thing that we have to work on. The conquest of Portugal is more or less about to be wrapped up in just a second as we do finish what's left of their just various areas. Alright, so that all said and done, we have managed to cut off part of the British Indian reconquest efforts. We are fighting for that victory point and actually winning it. And the air war is just continuing to be what it is. We do, however, have rocket interceptors now. I decided to add those since their high offensive traits might help us speed things up a bit. And yeah, not really going great or going poorly. We are also finishing off the last few remnants of the Portuguese resistance in Africa, which will hopefully break in the near future. And yeah, there is still this British force in India, still a little small number of pockets of Portuguese land and control in Africa, although that's nearly cleared up. And once the Portuguese are defeated, we'll be able to move all of our forces over in a just massive troop movement over to East Asia and just deal with the situation there. Over in the north, not much has changed. Really, none of our fronts are changing other than the ones we're actively focusing on, which is both positive and negative. The British managed to reconnect to their other territories again, however, in the process, trapping one of their units. And yeah, we're just moving forward, doing a lot of the same things now, admittedly. However, we do have a land army, and we will be able to move it over to really just the whole Chinese theater in a moment. They are actually on their way at the moment. Now, by moving our forces over, we're basically saying we don't think that we're going to need to use them for the United Kingdom in the near future. Honestly, I don't think we're going to. We're going to focus on the Chinese, the Japanese ruling China. And there we go, it looks like the video is coming back now. I'm not entirely sure what the situation was. At any rate, though, yeah, so we're just going to move into China now. That is basically the next big objective once we conquer mainland China. That's basically most of Asia under our control. We'll clear up the rest of the neutrals. Hopefully by then the air war over the United Kingdom will be won. We almost have a second nuclear bomb. I consider just attacking England again. However, I don't really think that that would do very much. And besides, I mean, it's really just kind of insult to injury. What I really want to see is what sort of pop-ups we get if we attack just particular cities, honestly. So we might go after the Japanese capital. We're also just kind of gunning it into China, more or less, although it is slow progress. Most of our armored units aren't there yet. And I look at air forces maybe as a target, since maybe that'll limit the British Air Force's ability to fight us. Who knows? We could also just nuke part of China, although that's kind of just insult to injury considering they're already an occupied state, and I'm not even sure taking over China will hurt the Japanese. One of our cavalry divisions, controlled by the AI, decides it wants to just kill itself into the Greeks, and we have to move it just to the other side of the Black Sea. And yeah, we are pressing forward. The gains aren't really the greatest, however, there are also actually gains being made against the Japanese. You'll notice in some areas they are resisting quite well. The Allied resistance is really just collapsing, which is a bit of a bummer, since if they're collapsing here, maybe, potentially, most likely not, but perhaps they would be collapsing everywhere we fought them. So it's a bit of a pity that we can't get into the British Isles. However, after 4 failed naval invasions, I'm not really looking forward to any more. We build more nuclear facilities, hopefully we'll be able to just mass produce nuclear weapons, and even if they don't have a very large effect, over time they'll probably just build up. So yeah, that's basically the goal all told. We're just going to focus more on the Asian theaters. Everywhere else is basically cleared up except for the air and naval wars, which we're doing decently well at, but more or less at stalemate conditions. And yeah, so we move all of those forces over to Asia. Next time we will probably just charge into China. You'll notice a few more losses on the Japanese side, and only about 40,000 losses to us, and another, let's say, 600,000 for the Allies. So we are doing decently well. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'll be back tomorrow with more, hopefully kicking the Axis out of Asia.